7 hours driving on the highway. Far away, far away, far away. Every moment I was spending on regrets was such a waste, such a waste, such a waste. Looking on the city lights.
Hello and welcome to the Ken and McElroy Show. I'm your host, Danille, here with Ken.
What's up, guys? How are you today?
Oh, so I have been up since 4 a.m. because I can't get used to the time change from Singapore.
I know. It does take a bit.
Oh, my God.
It takes a toll on you.
I'm like up and at it.
I know. The good thing is you're pretty productive from, 4 a.m.
Yeah, I did my hair and makeup this morning. I got some work done. You woke up at like 7 and I was like.
I love it. Yeah, I slept in.
Did 20 things.
It was good. We had a good weekend. Halloween party weekend.
I know. You were Ted Lasso.
I was. I went to Vegas first for that military influencer conference, which was awesome. Pitch Fest for military-owned businesses. And then we had our party.
We did.
Which was fun.
You were Ted Lasso and I was a troll.
I know. You and a bunch of other girls. That was fun.
We had a good time.
Yeah.
So they're going to possibly be raising interest rates here soon.
What is today? Today's Halloween. Jeez, I should know that.
Yeah, today's the 31st.
So in 2 days, I think the 1st and the 2nd. So it's going to be interesting. They're saying 0.75 of a point.
My brother's looking for a house right now, and I was telling him, I go, man, if you just wait a little bit, you might be able to get a really good deal. He's in Ohio.
Prices are coming down. That's documented. Not in every market, but in most. So some are worse than others. But, yep, it's going to be interesting.
Yes, it definitely will.
Yeah,
and he actually agrees with me because, I told him, I said a lot of times, these sellers, they're not used to letting things, they don't have time to let things sit sometimes. Like if they're going through like a move where they have to be relocated or a job loss or, they flipped a home. There's a lot of instances where sellers don't want to wait until the market gets better because it could be a long time.
Well, the seller often doesn't think of the buyer.
Yes.
They just think of the sale. So in this particular case, the buyer now has to qualify for more.
Right.
Because their payments went up.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, all things being equal, wage growth being equal, as it was 6 months ago, let's say, if you haven't had a spectacular increase in your income somehow or wages, you're buying less, and that's the way it works.
Yeah. And you very well, don't qualify for the same amount that you would have qualified. Yeah. So it's not even your choice as a buyer. It's just how it, the bank loan. And
most people, let's face it, most people save up for a down payment. And based on the circumstances at the time.
Yeah.
So now, if they want that same house, they don't have quite the down payment, probably, right. And they're now buying something that's less, potentially. And the other thing is like your brother and a lot of people, they're sitting in a good situation, probably with a low loan rate.
Right. So that's it, right? He can be patient right now.
What's your brother's rate? It's probably 3.
I think it's like 3%.
Yeah, so I would guess that's going to be a sticker shock for him when he actually goes out and looks.
Well, he was saying that his mortgage payment was going to be, his calculation was like $2,500 a month, and right now I think his payment's like $500 a month or something.
So there you go.
Now because he is upgrading to a nicer home, or wanting to.
Yeah. I think don't forget, guys, he lives in Ohio.
Right, like I think his first home was like $120,000 or something.
And he's owned it a while, but it's a nice home too, with a nice big yard and all that. But it is outside of Cleveland.
But he is looking the home. He's looking at pricing right now. It's $400,000 in Ohio for a 4-bedroom home, which
it's a lot
it used to be about $280,000, $300,000.
Yeah,
so.
He should have done that a year ago.
I know.
His payment would have been a lot less.
Kicking himself.
So that's the real issue. Your brother's going to take a look at, let's say it's $1,000 more a month. Based on the interest rates, it's probably a little bit more. If all things being equal, if he was moving into a similar price home, that would be a problem. A lot of people are going to say, I'm going to stay put.
Yep. You're going to have a lot of that, the I'm going to stay put people. But, and some people, though, like I said, they have to sell. If you get relocated for your job, and we're going through, a potential recession right now, a lot of people are going to have to sell their house. And that's when those looking for a home will be able to get a good deal.
Yeah.
And I told my brother that. I said, just wait till the home's been sitting for 60 days and then make them a low ball offer. You might be surprised.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the same situation. We're looking at building something, and we haven't broken ground. And we're getting all the bids from our general contractor, who's awesome, and our architect, who's awesome. But the prices of construction have gone way up, and the cost to finance a new build has gone way up. So we have a meeting this week around that. It's there's a lot of people that are just taking a pause, going, maybe we should just wait and see kind of what happens. For me, I'm just waiting to see. Are the construction prices going to go down a little bit? And, of course, our interest rates. But it doesn't look like interest rates are going to go down anytime soon. They have another meeting in December.
Yeah, so there's another one in November and another one in December. And I told my brother that, too. I said, listen, Doug, they're going to raise interest rates probably 2 more times before the end of the year. So
Correct.
I wouldn't be in a big hurry over here, because every interest rate increase is going to lower how much people qualify for. And my brother has a pretty big down payment. So he's kind of, like we talk about here, having that cash is king, he's in a better position than somebody only looking to put down like 5 or 10%.
Yeah, there is. It's interesting because I think you'll probably get this comment today. The one thing that these high interest rates will do is it will lower the number of listings.
Yes.
Because like your brother, he's going to go, I'm going to wait. I'm not going to list my home to buy another home. So what it does is it slows everything down. And, we already have a housing shortage according to the numbers, and that's not going to go away. So now we have this situation where people have this, what's called, I call trapped equity.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why we always say your house isn't, an investment, right? Because in order to get the money out, you got to sell it. You got to buy something else.
You have to realize it, right? Yep. I mean, that's one of the rules. And Rich said, poor dad, your house is not an asset. I know Robert got attacked for saying that. But, by definition, an asset is something that puts money in your pocket every month.
Right.
And, not exactly, but close. And so, the passive income. But it only what goes up must come down, and hopefully you guys can scoop some of that equity if you're planning on exiting. But it's possible that that equity might go away.
Yeah, and if you guys start to lose some of your equity in your net worth, like that's why we always talk about cash flow. It's not, you can't freak out about that. You know what I mean? Unless you're trying to sell your house and you wanted to downsize and scoop some of that equity.
It was never yours.
Yeah.
It was never yours. It's only yours if you sell.
Yeah.
So like what we did in Coeur d'Alene, I sold, made $2 million net on the sale. And it's realized all of a sudden I moved that into other stuff. That's real cash that I got for selling a home. But you got to time things that way. And that's what, that a lot of people are going to be in that situation.
Absolutely. And Mike on YouTube says renter country coming soon.
Yeah.
So very true. But I do want to get into some things before we hop into our topic today, which we're going to be talking about the dark side of real estate investing, because there definitely is a dark side, especially if you don't know what you're doing. And but first, I want to make sure you hit the like button. Really helps us out. We love that. We love getting our message across. We're really just trying to help people. And secondly, I have a webinar coming up next week with Jorge from Airbnb. It's next Wednesday. It's free, so make sure you sign up. It's a free webinar. He is going to show you how to get started in Airbnb with like rental arbitrage and also just getting your first Airbnb investment. Airbnb is taking a little bit of a hit right now, but it's still a good time to be looking for properties that cash flow. There's still good ones out there. You can still arbitrage, with much less risk than buying. So I think you should join the webinar, see what it's all about. You can ask Jorge questions, and why wouldn't you? It's free.
Yep.
So next Wednesday at 5 o'clock Arizona time. And I guess that's it for now.
Yeah. Well, this is a good segue, these interest rates, into the dark side of real estate. I think that people that own deals that have these bridge loans or these short-term loans or these construction loans or even hard money loans, are starting to realize the other side of this. The other side of the equation. Even we in my firm here are experiencing significant interest rate increases, and significant interest payment increases on some of our value adds, and we did not anticipate those. Luckily, we have the cash reserves, and which, I talk to you guys a lot about. You got to have cash reserves for this stuff, but these are killing some of the cash flow on some of the deals that we thought that, if you started a rehab a year ago and it's let's say 1 or 2 year long rehab, you did not anticipate these kinds of rate increases, and therefore if it's a short-term bridge loan, you did not anticipate the increased loan payment. And, and so it's a very, very much of a concern for people that are under construction, single-family home builders, multifamily. It doesn't really matter who, short-term rehab, any type of hard money. We're hearing hard money resets too. People are doing that. They're saying, hey, you were supposed to pay us back, and your house isn't selling, and you're clipping along at some crazy numbers, say 8, 10, 12% hard money. And the hard money companies are having a heyday right now, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, they're in a power position because they know a lot of these flippers are kind of on the ropes right now because they're not being able to sell their property. And, they haven't been able to refinance their property, or maybe some of them can't refinance their property. So, they're, it's a business, and they're definitely not feeling bad about raising rates. And it's a risk to them too, because the property could go back to the bank. They could lose some of their money. So I mean, there are things where the hard money is also.
Yeah, the hard money does not want your real estate, but it is the collateral for the loan. Mm-hmm. And so we could be seeing some of those in the future. I don't think any hard money lender wants real estate, but that those loan defaults are real, and the problem is that we have also rising expenses. Right. So we're getting clobbered on insurance costs, we're getting clobbered on property taxes, we're getting clobbered on utility costs, we're getting clobbered on rehab costs, just general things like your washer dryer scenario that we were talking about right before. Appliances are up. It's hard to get things still. It's getting better for sure, but they're more money. And labor costs are up. So you have all of that too. So all of those things are a combination, aren't necessarily good for inflation. We always talk about how real estate is a good hedge for inflation. Well, it is in a lot of respects, especially if you have fixed debt. Mm-hmm. But in this particular case, if the price of your real estate's going down, that's called deflation. It is possible, talk to George Gammon, to have inflation and deflation at the same time. He explained it to me this way. He said, picture a hot air balloon. The hot air balloon's going up, at 8-9% inflation. Okay, it's going up, but it has a hole in it, and that hole is deflation. And so you can have things that are deflationary, and we do. Think of, this iPhone. When you bought it, I bought this a year ago, let's say it's worth less. Computers are worth less. Things can be deflationary in an inflationary time. So it's just important to watch all of this, and these are things that are going to start jumping up. They're not going to people are going to burn through their cash first, if they have it. But a lot of people are going to be scrambling to try to exit some of this, some real estate. If you have something that you're feeding every month, be careful. And this is the time to not mess around, because you got interest rates tomorrow potentially going up, or the next day, and again in December.
Well, and I think it's really good advice. Some syndicators have come to you, asking for a little bit of advice, especially some of the newer ones. And, you're kind of telling them, cut your losses early. You know what I mean? If you're already in a situation where you're barely making anything on your deal, or you're even losing a little bit on your deal, it's not going to get better in the next few months, guys. Like, they're raising interest rates again. Your buyers are going to qualify for less. Yep. So, you got to cut your losses and be smart about it.
Don't forget you guys most flippers, most rehabbers, most people that are into this, I would call for the short term, you made a lot of money in the last few years, okay? This is what happens at the end of a market that's turning. So, you just got to accept it and cut your losses and maintain your cash. I did a prediction video, I think it was about, 4 or 5 months ago, Jerry, where I said interest rates are going to be 8%. You remember all the hate I got for that? It was awesome.
You did get a
I
lot.
did. I was like, guys, I'm telling you, you can't have inflation this high. Well, here we are. And, it's not trying to say I told you so, but I told you so. These rates are real, and the Fed is going to combat inflation. And real estate was considered inflationary while it was going up like this, guys. So this is what they're doing. It's going to continue even through next year. They're saying 2023.
Absolutely. And I think that, you're just going to see a lot of job losses. I know Phil on here said, he's in the industry and he feels like, he said he used to do 12 reports a month. Now he's down to 1. I'm not sure what he does in the industry, but he's very much slowing down. And I have a client that comes in and works in the mortgage industry. And she's like, I need to start looking for another job because we're literally just playing on our phones all day because we have nothing to do. And so if people are starting to see the writing on the wall, real estate's a big industry. And a lot of people are going to be out of work, which is going to in turn make more things out of, it's going to create a big recession here. And, a lot of people are going to lose their jobs and it's going to be,
it is, guys,
go
it's
through
coming.
all that.
I'm like one of the most positive people. I'm just,
You are, always.
I'm just like, I actually went as Halloween as Ted Lasso, if that tells you anything. So, but the point is, we have an office building where I think I mentioned this before, it has a good sized mortgage company in it. They came to us and they said, we need less space. Mm-hmm. We need to downsize. And so this is happening, guys. I'm telling you, this is happening. It's going to happen to title companies. It's going to happen to real estate agents. It's going to happen to mortgage companies. It's going to be a little bit better for everyone in a lot of respects because now things are going to stabilize. You're not going to have to chase a handyman like we've been doing for years. Everybody's like, and the subcontractors aren't going to have as much leverage. And by the way, the supply chains are all going to even up because all of a sudden, we're not going to have quite the demand for all those things. So this is a reset, and it's happening. It's coming, and I think it's going to be really interesting. The other thing that will happen, and we're already seeing it, is Airbnb, VRBO, the owner short-term rental market. That's going to show up pretty quickly because people aren't going to have that discretionary cash. Mm-hmm. To go spend like they were before.
Yeah, and we're already really starting to see that. We have some friends with some rentals in Scottsdale, and she was telling me that some of my friend that has the Airbnb was telling me that their bookings are down, and other people they know's bookings like they're not booked for the next 2 months, which is weird because it's a popular time in Scottsdale. So you're already starting to see that showing up.
And just so keep your ear to the market and start listening. Go online and start listening to people that aren't trying to sell you something. But I'm hearing in Florida and Texas and Southern California and Arizona and some of the markets that are a little more touristy, let's say, not just those, that the Airbnb market is way down. Mm-hmm. And I think the Airbnb owners have also been spoiled, and so, this is all coming, the brakes, people are pumping their brakes right now, but they haven't quite slammed on the brakes yet. So this is the time where you need to be making some good decisions. Get out of your toxic stuff. Get out of the stuff that's going to be negative or potentially negative. Rates are going to continue to go up. I do think rents are also going to go up. Because as I've said over and over and over and over, I think we're heading to a renter nation. But this is the time to cut your losses and get heavy into cash.
Absolutely. And, you want to make sure in this kind of market that you have a little bit of leeway with your rents and you have a little bit of leeway, with your
That's a good point.
Those kind of things too,
Yeah.
because the rental market could slightly correct in some areas as well. So
It
you
will.
don't want to be like, and we always tell you anyways, you don't want to be break even. You don't want to ever be break even, because that's not a good place to be. And you don't really want to be cash flowing like $100, right? You want to be cash flowing like a few $100s a month, so you have some wiggle room, or you have another income that can kind of feed the property if you need to. But you
Yeah.
don't want to be in a position where you're like trying to come up with money you don't have for a property.
Take care of your tenants, guys.
Mm-hmm.
if they're the ones that are paying your bills, and they are, then you better take care of them. Go handle them, fix anything they need, make sure you're building relationships with these people. You want them to renew, because they are significantly a big piece of you having a really bad few months or not. So we got to take care of the people that are paying the bills. Don't forget, the renter, the tenant, whatever you call them, they're the ones that typically are paying your mortgages, your expenses, and all that stuff. It's just flowing through you.
But I do think it's, good, when we talk about the dark side of real estate, to mention the things that we don't recommend that people do, because I think in these kind of markets, people get excited when they think they found a good deal, but they don't always consider the bad side of, their real estate investment.
All right, let's go into those.
So, right now, I think one of the bigger mistakes people make is they choose a bad location. Like, I really do. I think a lot comes down to the location of your property.
I always tell people you cannot manage your way out of a bad neighborhood, period. Yeah. It just won't happen. I'll just briefly say we had a mayor at one time in Phoenix that said he was going after landlords for bad landlords, which I completely supported. And he had a list of 10 properties. So I went and met with him. And I said, "Okay, Phil, what are they?" And he gave me the addresses. I went down there, and I went back to him. I go, "I can't touch these places." And they were deals. I said, everything around it has a crime issue, or, these are places that people don't want to be. So the location is significant.
Well, I actually have a funny story. I have a friend, they bought, some apartments, and it wasn't in the best area. And, they were upset because the tenants were noticing that it wasn't in that great of an area. But the building across the street was just like boarded up and condemned. So they actually paid to remodel the front of the whole building across the street just so the tenants wouldn't get a bad vibe when they were like walking down the road, which did help a little. But, it's just, you had homelessness around there. You just had all these things that would really hinder finding good tenants. And then the other thing is not just a bad neighborhood, but a neighborhood that is far from the city that people don't necessarily want to live in. They might not want to live an hour outside the city.
Right. And it doesn't even have to be an hour. It's just, with traffic, this is a big deal now, especially with gas and fuel, the way that it's gone up so much. So, people, their commute, like we have it in our office. So we have people that live, 30, 40, even an hour away because they want to. And then they commute in. And we also have work from home and all that stuff, like a lot of places. But one of the things we had to address last year was that they were running into significant increases in just their commute costs.
Mm-hmm.
So these are real things. And, in some cases, I recall, was it Jerry, it was like $500 or plus $750 a month, right, in gas. Okay, so think about this. Let's say that you would have to make that up somehow. So you're on the edge of town, trying to figure out a way for this thing to cash flow, but you're better off actually being in town, because all things being equal, you can actually charge a little bit more if they don't have a commute. It's the opposite of what you would think.
Yeah, absolutely. And then another thing is your tenants. So I think between location and tenants, this is where people really mess up. And, somebody on here, Michael, said, your tenants are your customers, right? Yep. And you want to make sure, though, especially now that we're going into a recession and people are losing their jobs and everything else, that you're picking the right tenant. You're screening them properly. You're making sure that, they don't have, a criminal background, that they don't have horrible credit, that they didn't just, screw over their last landlord. I mean, these credit checks are very, very important.
Well, bad tenants chase out good tenants. That's a fact. Trust me, I've been in this business 25 years. I've seen it over and over and over. We made some bad decisions. Sometimes it's through a manager. It's not our intention to make a bad decision, but we've had situations where tenants move in, they're super disruptive, and the good ones move away because they're like, okay, management's not going to handle it, landlord's not going to handle it, I'm just going to go somewhere else. And now you're sitting in a property that's got maybe potentially higher vacancy, and one tenant that's a problem. So it is a really, really good point.
Yep. And if you're somebody that's really tight on your cash flow or somebody that can't really feed their property, if you do have to go through an eviction, then that's going to cost you, at least a couple months rent. In some of these more pro-tenant states, it could take a year.
Depending on where you are.
Yeah, and you could have to pay for their moving expenses
well, you think
in
about
Washington.
It, guys. All right, so you spend all this money advertising and cleaning the unit, painting the unit, maintenance, all that stuff, and then you move somebody in that's a pain in the butt, right?
Right.
Maybe they're paying you, maybe they're not. Maybe they're doing damage, maybe they're not. But then the process to get them out, the legal costs and all those things, and you're battling with somebody just to get them out, and you're reliant on the state's laws. That's why this next chapter, let's call it, of who are your legislators is so important. Your landlord tenant laws and all that kind of stuff is really, 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 really important. Because in Phoenix, you can get somebody out in 30 days.
Right.
But in California, it's quite a different scenario. In Oregon, it's quite a different scenario. In New York, it's quite a different scenario. So those are real things, and that extra month or that extra 2 months plus the legal fees and the tenant's rights, and they should have rights, and they do have rights. But you're going to have situations in different states that are really pro-landlord or pro-tenant, and you need to know those because, this is the time, especially now, could get tested based on what's happening in the economy.
Absolutely. And, in all of this, and we're going to get to your questions. Some of you have really good questions. We'll get to those. But all of this really comes down to, a bad location and bad tenants are going to give you a negative cash flow issue.
Yeah.
So
yeah, let's don't forget about that.
Yeah, because we always talk about, at the end of the day, it's all about the cash flow on if you're successful or not. And all these problems are going to give you a negative cash flow issue that you may or may not be able to afford to fund. So you have to really, and I think that people that are inexperienced are the ones that kind of buy a cheaper place that's maybe not in the best area, but they can afford it. Or they move in a tenant because they don't want a vacancy, but they're kind of a fringe tenant, didn't really qualify. Those are all really big mistakes going into what we're about to go into.
They are, yeah. And there's also good tenants that have financial problems. And those are the ones that come into you and say, hey, I've got this scenario, and we could be going into those kinds of times. Those are the folks that you want to work with. And we did that back in 2008. We did that during the pandemic. As I said, there were 3 buckets. There was bucket 1, the people just paid and they were fine, no issue. Bucket 2, they came in and said, I have a problem. I don't have any income. I don't want to move out. I don't want to be evicted. And you work with them. Bucket 3, silence, and skips and all that kind of stuff. It's really your bucket 3 people that you need to be most concerned about.
Yeah, and you are going to deal with those things. Some of you watched my video. I had a tenant lose her job a few months ago, and I had to then, I could have held her in the lease. I could have made her pay. I could have drug her through hell and all these things. But, she came to me. She wanted to move out. She lost her job. I told her, listen, I'll let you move out and I'll let you break out of the lease, no fees, as soon as I get it rented.
Yep.
So I rented it actually for $100 more.
And she helped show it.
Yep. And, I think she had to be in her lease for another month. I think it took me a month and a half. And she was super happy and grateful. It worked out great because all her furniture was still there for the showing, which is always beneficial if the place looks nice. And, it was a win-win situation. Yep. Now, of course, there was a cancellation fee I could have charged her and this and that.
And through the end of the lease, technically,
but
right?
She also could have just decided that she was just not going to pay me.
Right.
Because she lost her job and she's young and she could have decided, whatever. And, of course, that would have hurt her credit and stuff. But, you want to work with people, right? If they're trying to work with you, if they're telling you that they can't afford the apartment anymore, you want to try to do things where it's a win-win. Like I made another $100 a month from my new tenant. So it was a win-win situation, and you really just want to do the right thing, for people, right? Without obviously breaking your own bank.
Correct.
But you're going to have these situations. I mean, you're going to have, people might need to move in a roommate or something that live there by themselves.
Correct.
People are going to get really creative. So, and always keep a really open dialogue with your tenants, because even with her, she was starting to pay a couple of days late and she never did that before. And, I was the one that said to her, hey, is everything okay? Because, I lost my job, so I've been like babysitting and doing all this stuff. So if you notice your tenants are kind of being a little bit behavior that's not like how they normally are, don't be afraid to bring up the conversation and ask them, because she was very nervous to tell me and she was very upset. And, so they might be trying to hide something where it's actually better if you actually know what's going on before, because it gives you some time before they start just not being able to pay you.
If you have a relationship with them, they'll communicate with you. Guys, employers are getting squeezed too on inflation. A lot of people don't care about that, but and there's a lot of focus on the common, the food and the gas and some of those kinds of things, and energy. Well, it's also floating up to the landlords, and it's also floating up to the employers in the form of labor and that kind of stuff. So and even the Fed and the government's even projecting unemployment to go up. Even I did that in a video. So these are real things, I believe, that you're going to start to see. They're going to start to accumulate, and it's your job to stay on top of this and work with these people. It's not your job to evict somebody who's been loyal and faithful to you the whole time during the course of your lease.
Exactly.
Work with them.
They want to work with you. If they want to move somebody in because they need to, run the credit and background check on that person, add them to the lease. Don't overthink these things.
Well, that happened with your new renter, right? He has mom and
his mom and his girlfriend are both on the lease. And his mom comes in every 3 months for like a week, and it helps them with the payments because these payments are getting bigger. And
they figured it out. They just said, we're going to move here and we're going to figure out a way to where there's not just one person paying, like in her case, that there's three all helping with the rent.
Exactly. Yep. And also, my tenant, I had mentioned this in the video, but he had 3 dogs. So a lot of people were very leery about that. These are the little things. They're little dogs. I go over there. His place is immaculate. Like, he's like OCD. So, you can't just always judge a book by its cover on that stuff either. Use your own common sense, use your judgment, get your security deposits, but, be reasonable. So... All right, so we're going to jump into some of these YouTube questions and the Inner Circle questions. Make sure you guys join the Inner Circle. It's only $30 a month. You have access to Ask Ken questions, and we always get to all of the Inner Circle questions. And then also we have our monthly happy hours and book club. So very beneficial.
A lot, yeah. We've added a lot of stuff.
Yes.
It's been fun.
Yeah, the happy hour guests are always great too. They're always like, we just had Eric on for tax savings by the end of the year. One of our members said Eric saved him $180,000 just by
as he sold his business.
A tip that he didn't know. But even with you guys, I mean, he could easily save you money too if you're not doing everything you need to be doing on your taxes. So let's see here. So Nick from the Inner Circle wants to know, do you keep duplicate keys for all your tenants' doors in case they lose a key and you can open it for them?
Yes. Yeah.
And that's not the only reason.
Yeah. We always do. So with every lock, if you think about this, there used to be a master key, guys. When I first started this business, there was a master key that could open every unit. How scary is that? So that's obviously long gone. The one thing that you might want to consider is a code, the programmable code. Those are really, really nice. The industry's moving to that, and then now you don't have to get into that. So basically, you have a code, just like you would. I'm sure you guys have used these before. So there's a code. Like I have one at my home, and so there's a code for the lady who cleans my house. She uses that code, and then when I got a different house cleaner, I just changed the code. And so I have my code, she has her code, and you can give one to a handyman. So there's all these things that you can do to kind of manage that a little bit better, and it's all digital. So it's kind of nice. So I would consider that, but always have a second key.
Right. And then also, what if something happens to your tenant and you need to get in the house, or there's a fire in the fire department and they're not home? Like you always want to you have to have a second key.
Yeah,
And you just have to put it in a safe or somewhere very
The fire
secure.
department won't use a key, trust me.
Or whatever.
I've been in that shit.
You have a flood going on.
They
like,
use an
whatever
axe
it is.
and a foot. I've watched it. Yeah, they don't mess around.
So Liberty from YouTube has a good question. They want to know, if you rent out a spare bedroom in your house, can you evict people the same way that don't pay?
Wow, that's a good one. Well, I first of all, you definitely should have some kind of an agreement, some kind of a lease agreement. All that stuff would be.
Well, the worst thing you could do would be just move in, just pay me, $500 a month. It's fine. That's bad.
Yeah. It needs to be all papered up, guys. So there are situations like around student universities, let's say, where have a common kitchen and they have what they call lock-offs. So they have bedrooms that are all rented independently. And yes, you do need to have a system to be able to evict in people that are renting a room for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to be able to turn to a lease agreement and say, here's the lease. They did not pay me. Let's get the eviction process.
You think about
started.
it. There's so many rules, guys, around just the basics, maintaining the place, what they can keep in there from pets, let's say, or the use of the common areas, where they park. There's just so many things that need to be in those kinds of agreements for when you rent out a room.
Absolutely. Yeah. Don't ever make it casual. Even if it's your best friend, don't do it.
Yeah.
Darla from the Inner Circle wants to know, her home equity line of credit is at 7.7%.
Oh, wow.
For $75, she can lock it in for 2 to 10 years. For 2 years. And for 7 to 9%, she can lock it in for 10 years. Do you think I should pay the $75 to lock in the interest?
Yes, if it's used. So if you have, I don't know how much money you have out, but yes. See, the thing is, it's not very much money.
No, $75. You're fine, girl.
To do that, what you're trying to do is this is a hedge. This is a way for you to hedge an interest rate, a future potential interest rate. If rates don't go up and they continue to go down, you can always do a refi. So that's the other side of it. So what you're doing is you're hedging the rate increase. So I definitely, for such a small amount of money, I would do that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I mean, I did that with my home equity line. I turned it into a loan. I locked it in at 6%. This is when it was at 4.2%. And, the banker was like, I don't think you want to do that.
We had a lot of discussion
you're locking it
this.
in for a higher rate, but I'm not going to pay it off for 10 years.
Yeah.
So I'm like, but, with my product, I can move it 3 different times. So if it does go down, I'm allowed to reset it 3 different times in the 10 years.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But now I'm looking like a genius because I'm at 6 and my home equity line is about at the same thing.
You think about it. At the time, it was significantly more than the floater rate.
Right.
So she decided she just wanted to hedge, which she did. And now she looks like a genius, as we head into these crazy numbers. Hopefully a lot of you did that as well.
You want fixed rate debt.
You want to know what your payment is in a year or 2 years or 3 years. That's what you want. Right. If there's lots of cash flow, then just do it.
Right. Absolutely. Zach from YouTube said, is paying a bad tenant to move out here to stay? I guess it depends where you live.
Yeah. We've done it. Mm-hmm. We had a situation where we had a sex offender move in to one of our properties. And they hadn't registered in the state. So we typically run all the stuff that we do, but they just didn't do it. So they did it after they moved in. So they moved from Texas, I think it was, and then they moved into one of our apartments, and then they registered. So that's how we found out. So now they're in, right?
Yep.
And of course, they flyered the place, and I was like, oh, my gosh. So we have this issue where a lot of the neighbors were upset, as you would imagine, and we just cut a deal with them. So listen, you should have, we didn't want to go down a legal path. You should have done this before you did, and you didn't. So we have, legal recourse, of course, but it would have been expensive. We would have had to pay an attorney and all that kind of stuff. So what we did was we just paid for his next place.
Yep.
And it calmed everything down in the apartments, and he moved, and with really almost no issue.
Yeah, and that is something a strategy that you can do if
Yep.
you're in a bad situation, or some of these states still have, the eviction
Yeah.
moratoriums
Like
crazily going, but
you got to weigh, like, do you want to pay for the legal, or do you want to pay the tenant to move?
right,
For us, it was going to be about the same, maybe,
but
so
faster.
it's just easier.
Yep. Vin wants to know, do you see things changing if we have a political red wave?
It's gonna be, if it does, it's gonna be slow. But yes, I do think that things will change. But I have friends that are in very high places that are red, and their issue is homelessness, affordability, and tenants' rights and things like that. So it doesn't mean that somebody's going to step into office, because they're red, and it's going to be pro-landlord.
Affordability is an issue.
Yeah.
Red or blue doesn't matter the side.
Correct.
It's an issue. It's an issue for seniors.
Yep.
It's an issue for
Correct.
younger people. It's
Right.
an issue for renters.
Yep.
So it's just an issue. So,
Yeah.
and now how they handle the issue, red or blue, is probably potentially going to be a little bit different. But it's not like a Republican's going to come in and say, oh yeah, no big deal, like whatever. If you can't afford rent, then too bad. All the politicians are going to try to work with inflation with all these different groups. So, it's just going to be how they do it. So
Yep.
it's not going to be a big difference, but there will be a difference state to state depending on where your state lands.
Right. Yeah. And I would think that's a really astute, great question. It's going to depend on the state and the politicians in the state and how they handle it. It's going to be case by case. The other thing to watch is specifically like Arizona, Texas. It has those have very powerful, and even Florida, associations that fight for the rights of the landlords, the property management folks, and stuff like that. So you want to have that. You want to have people like we pay for, because there's all these tenant rights groups, popping up at all times. It's happening in Arizona right now. Rents have gone up a lot, and people are getting squeezed, and they're pissed, and so there has to be somebody on the other side at least to protect what there is in place and what's been in place for all these years. I'm not saying there's maybe aren't changes needed, but that's going to come up.
Absolutely. So from our inner circle, Moises wants to know, they're starting off from scratch, and they don't have anything saved for a down payment. Would the bank still loan me for a home?
Probably not.
Yeah, you need a down payment.
Yeah.
But look into the first-time home buyers programs. A lot of times, down payments are as low as like 3%.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
got to save something.
If you're doing it personally, they're going to want, and investors are going to want you to have skin in the game too.
Mm-hmm.
Most people I know started with no money. So you can still buy real estate with no money. But one that you're using personally, probably not. One that's an investment, I think you probably still could do. But way back in the early days, I gave 90% of the deal to my investors, and I took 10. And I said, I'm going to make this work, and I did. And I paid them all back, and then they said, okay, let's do that again, and then I adjusted my percentage. I got a little bit more the next one. So there are ways to buy real estate with no money, tons of ways. And the investors, they look at the same thing that all investors look at is it a good deal? Does it cash flow?
Yep. Now, M. Polino has a very good question, and I feel like we could do like a whole video on this, but he said thoughts on millennials and student loans and how it affects real estate, because he's younger and he's seeing a lot of his peers struggling with this.
Yeah, that's a tough one. We have friends, more Danille than me, that they have 100, 200, 300,000 in student loan debt, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you have one friend that's a doctor.
Yeah, and her student loans are going up, not down.
And she can't buy a home.
Right.
It's horrible. Because the lender looks at all your debt and all your what you're paying every month versus what you have coming in. So, maybe I don't know. Maybe Biden's gonna fix that for her. I don't really know.
Yeah, his $10,000.
Yeah.
That he is.
I guess. Well, and that's that's the other side of it. It definitely can help people. Can help people. That little monthly payment. That going away can be helpful. So, I think it's going to be a problem.
Absolutely. And if you're thinking about going to college or you're thinking about sending your kids to college, just make sure you're making a real educated decision about that and the pros and cons of that. For some people it's great. For other people, it really can hold the debt of it can hold them back.
I'll tell you the other thing to look at is what they're actually teaching these kids. You got to get into the curriculum because I'm speaking from personal experience. I sent my kids to a private high school because it was, at the time, I thought one of the best decisions, and it wasn't. It was the curriculum, the teachers. They had a lot of turnover. Teachers are underpaid. There's a whole bunch of other things that you need to look at. I would say my kids came out of that school with not a great education, which was super disappointing. I paid a lot of money for it. Would have been better off putting them into a really, really good public school somewhere. What I realize is that a lot of times these who are your teachers? The teachers. There was a couple shining stars in the school, the teachers, but the overwhelming majority were not that great.
Yes. So our next question from the inner circle comes from Chad. He said, other than listening to your podcast and engaging in your inner circle, what other people and groups should I engage in to get ahead in real estate? I think that's a good question. I think a lot of people, starting out are wondering that, like, how do I really get ahead?
What do you think?
I think that there's a lot of meetup groups. There's a lot of local meetup groups, and I think there's a lot of BS people in all those kind of groups that try to sell you stuff. But I think in all of that, you can find people that really could be a good mentor for you. I think finding a mentor is a really good thing. And I think just who you hang around, you are, what do they say? That you're the
5 people you hang out with. Yeah.
Yeah. So, if you're hanging out with just people that are, working a 9-to-5 job and not really interested in entrepreneurship or real estate, they're not going to really help you get ahead, which that's not what real estate's all, life's all about. But if you surround yourself with people that are, doing that kind of stuff, you could really get ahead.
You got to change your network. That's important. I had to do that my whole life, growing up with, where I grew up was very blue collar as an example, and most of the people didn't even go to college. So, I did that. And then, then in college, you got the people that, are going to go into, let's say, careers, and I wanted to be more entrepreneurial, so I had to change that. I had to change. Then I got into EO, Entrepreneurs Organization. Then I got a YPO, and so I kept having to change my network. And each time, it was a little uncomfortable.
Yeah,
it was, and and then all of a sudden you're kind of part of that network. So you just got to do it. You just get out, break your routine up, and these things are all over the internet. You should be able to find one, no problem.
Exactly. So the Bohemian had a good question. They want to know, how do they get an investor to invest when they found a great deal, but they've never had an investor before? So, where do they find these investors and, to let them know about their deal?
Yeah. Well, if you, first of all, if it is truly a great deal, I'd be interested to know what you think that is. So that's the first thing. Every single person that has an investment thinks it's a great deal. So for me, a good deal is something that produces an 8 to 12% cash on cash return, and I get my money back within a short period of time. That's what I think a good deal is. I don't know if that's what you think. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, if you don't have a group of investors, then you're, again, it's kind of the same conversation we just had. You have the wrong network, because there's a tremendous amount of people that have investors. Just, most of the realtors, most of the people that have been buying things, in this last few years crazy market all have investors in their back pocket. So they're everywhere,
Yeah.
So they're everywhere.
If you have a good deal, I mean, just
It gets
post
funded.
it. There's all these forums.
Yeah.
There's all those meetup groups. I mean, just start going around and letting people know.
LinkedIn.
But have your data.
Yeah, LinkedIn's you can go online and just type in accredited investor group or investor groups.
Yep.
There's a zillion ways, just to try something.
Absolutely. And make sure while we're here that you hit the like button if you're enjoying the content. Really helps us out. We do these videos every week. And secondly, is I'm going to be hosting a webinar with Jorge. He has a big Airbnb real estate portfolio. He started with nothing. He can help you get started even if you don't have any money. So we're going to be talking to him about that for free next Wednesday at 5 o'clock. Make sure you join kenmcelroy.com/webinar. So to keep going with these, you have some really good questions. There's so many. So Rick from the Inner Circle, he currently owns a fourplex in Phoenix, and it cash flows $1,000 a month. He also has about $400,000 in cash as well. If he were to sell it, he would profit another $300,000. His interest rate is 3.6%. Got all that?
Hold it.
All right.
I don't know what your question is, but hold it. If you've got if you're netting $12,000 a year, probably tax free because of your depreciation, that's awesome, and you're going to pay a capital gain if you sell.
So what do you think that is? Because his question was, he wants to maybe combine all that to purchase something bigger. So do you think it's an ego thing a little bit, or do you think that?
Well, I don't think the timing's good right now. You got a 3.6% interest rate. That is gold, right? You think about it. So if you bought that exact fourplex, you would not have any cash flow today, period. So, that $1,000 a month would be gone because it would be in your interest payment. So your mortgage payment would go up. So that's gold. Hold on to it. Again, you don't need your own money to buy bigger stuff. Mm-hmm. That's the lesson. You think that you need to sell something. So, I understand maybe you're partner averse, and that's fair. A lot of people are. But you've got a nice little cash flower with a low fixed payment on it. I believe it's fixed at 3.6 with a bunch of cash flow and a bunch of equity. I would just stick with that one for a while and put that on the shelf and never look back. And then just look, don't look at that as the equity for your next deal. Just stop that thinking and just go look for other deals. But don't.
And how to raise that extra money.
Yeah.
Grass isn't always greener.
No.
So Dom wants to know from the Inner Circle, can you clarify how developers raise equity for their projects? Do they use an outside firm that takes a fee or a percentage of the project? If so, can this strategy be used by everyday investors?
That's a really good question. So let's define what a developer is. A developer like ourselves would go out and first go find a broker, and then we would go, let's say, find 20 acres, and then we would put that in escrow. At this point, I really have nothing. I have a 20-acre piece in escrow. Then I have to go get the architectural and all what we call the soft costs and all that stuff to actually come up with some kind of a concept. Doesn't really matter what it is. Just you have to design something on that piece of land. Okay, all that is done. Costs money. At that point, you still really don't have anything because investors invest in dollars and cents. Is it going to be worth more than you build it for, or is it going to cash flow? And so you don't know any of that until that developer puts all those pieces together. And that can be a while, or it could be short if it's already packaged up. The investors, they can come from all kinds of places. You can come from institution, Wall Street, as an example. You can come from private equity. You can come from family office. You can even use a broker-dealer, and those are all fees. Those are all people that take fees for placement of equity. And the splits are all very different, and that's all part of the ownership. But don't forget, if you find all that deal, you put all that together, and yes, everyday person can do this. the equity wants their money back quickly. So these are not long-term investors. If you're raising money at that pace, they want their money back in, let's say, 3-4 years. So you're subject to market timing. And so this is the wrong time to do that because the market is in flux a little bit. And we're seeing cap rates go up and values go down.
Great. So Destin from YouTube wants to know, can you talk about how the housing market predictions in the U.S. could affect Canada? Canadian real estate or just Canadian investors? Or does it?
Yeah, well, I think, well, first of all, Canadian investors, one of the bigger issues is going to be around the dollar. So we have a very strong dollar right now, which makes their dollar weaker. And when our dollar was weak, their dollar got stronger. So you got to think about the currency between the two. And by the way, this is out of experience. I actually raised a couple $100 million out of Canada back in 08, 9, 10 through what's called the RSP, or Retirement Savings Plan. It was basically our 401k. And they invested when our dollar was almost the same. And the Canadian dollar and U.S. dollar are. The reason why this is important is because if our dollar is strong and yours is, let's say Canada's is weak, as ours gets weak and yours gets stronger, there's a difference on what because it's called repatriation when you're, when you're returning that money. So that's a big factor. And then of course, you're going to be taxed twice. So, we have to tax on the U.S. side, and then you have to tax on the Canadian side. So I haven't even gotten to your real estate question yet, but you have a currency issue and you have a tax issue potentially. So there are lots of ways around this, and we don't have time to go into it. You can set up a U.S. corporation, and you can pay U.S. taxes and all that kind of stuff, and you can run stuff through that way, pay U.S. taxes, and keep the money in the U.S. and do it that way. So there's a lot of cross-border from, especially in the U.S., Mexico, Canada. But traditionally, when the U.S. has been on sale, interest rates are low. When I say on sale, a lot of Canadian investors came in 09, 10, 11, 12, let's say, when like areas like Scottsdale that they wanted to have a second home in. They could come down and use it because the market really got clobbered. So all of those things have to happen, and they're all important. So you got tax, you got interest rates, and you got pricing.
Absolutely. So there's a question from Phil, and he wanted to know what we thought of the Vegas market. But I also think that kind of gives a bigger question, right? Like, what do you think? What markets, are you kind of focusing on, and which ones are you feeling like might pop?
So Vegas scares the heck out of me. I was just there Thursday on Friday, and I've lived in Vegas. I know Vegas. One of the things that Vegas is changing, but one of the things that props Vegas up are people flying in and doing everything that they do. They get a hotel room, they go to dinner, they get a rental car, perhaps, maybe not. They go out, spend a bunch of money. It's basically a short-term little vacation. Final Four, all these really cool things and big concerts and all that stuff. So when the economy goes into what it's going into now, into the recession, it affects markets like Vegas a lot. So Vegas would definitely be on my radar for something that would be potentially a problem. And a lot of other touristy type markets. So I like markets that are progressively growing from an employment standpoint. And Vegas hinges, unfortunately, a little bit on the casino markets, and obviously the casinos can ebb and flow. The best way to gauge Vegas is on the room rate. So, something that maybe now is $300 a night or $400 a night could easily be at $99 a night, in the future. And that's when Vegas is in trouble because of their occupancies and their casinos. So you just got to look at each one independently. I think most of Florida has got a very, very strong future, I would think. Texas, Arizona, those are kind of the markets. I really like Salt Lake City a lot. I'd be very concerned about Boise. personally, and some of these markets that are, people are going after the landlords for rent caps and stuff like that starting to show up. I'd be careful of those. And money's going to flow where it's treated best, and that's what's going to happen.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Make sure you check out my webinar next Wednesday. Go now to sign up. There's limited spots available. KenMcElroy.com/webinar. Jorge is going to be on talking all about Airbnb, and he was on a few months ago, and it was an awesome conversation. So it's free, and make sure you join.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next week.
Guys, see you next week.